Robert Heldt, president of Custom Media, invited me to be his guest on his new podcast, Asia AIM. We talked about relationships first, the unwritten rules of B2B sales in Japan. If you are interested in Japan, and particularly in how to be successful in sales here in Japan, then you might find the podcast of interest. Let me know how what we talk about squares with your own experience selling here. Sales in Japan is always a fascinating subject. When I first came here in 1992 to live here and work and sell here, I brought my consultative sales techniques from Australia, tried to apply it to the Japanese buyers and got zero progress, got nowhere. I couldn't understand it because, this works so well in Australia. It took a while to filter down to my brain that I haven't built a relationship yet. I'm coming in with the offer. They are not looking at the offer. They're looking at me. Can we trust this guy before we do anything?
Welcome back to Asia AIM, the podcast that shines a light on the people, ideas and innovations shaping business, marketing and communications in Japan and across the APAC region. I'm your host, Robert Heldt, and today we're exploring the critical aspects of B2B sales success in the Japanese market with a special focus on the unwritten rules that prioritizes relationships above all else. My guest is someone who truly embodies the phrase, a lifetime of experience in Japan, Dr. Greg Story. Greg is the author of Japan Sales Mastery, the #1 bestseller on sales in Japan. He serves as president of Dale Carnegie Training, Japan. With a PhD in Japanese organizational decision-making, Greg has spent over 40 years in Japan leading, transforming, and growing businesses. He's been the country head of 4 different organizations, launched a startup in Nagoya, and pulled off major turnarounds in Osaka and Tokyo for Austrade, eventually becoming Minister Commercial at the Australian Embassy here in Japan. From there, he took on the challenge of combining startup energy with turnaround urgency at Shinsei's retail bank, overseeing 550 staff and driving 2/3 of the bank's retail revenue as joint CEO. Later, he became country head for the National Australia Bank in Japan before stepping into his current role at Dale Carnegie Training in 2010. Greg is a master trainer and an international award-winning sales leader at Dale Carnegie and the author of 8 books in English and Japanese on sales, presentation, training, business, and leadership. We'll share all those titles for you in the show notes. When he's not shaping business leaders, he's an adjunct professor at Griffith University and a 6th dan in Shitoryu Karate. He applies martial art philosophies and strategies to business issues. So if you've ever wondered why deals in Japan can hinge on relationships in a way that's just different from anywhere else in the world, this episode is for you. Greg, it's great to have you on the podcast. Welcome.
Well, Robert, thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to join your new podcast, and congratulations on the innovation. So looking forward to hearing more of the episodes that you're recording. I've already listened to the first one. It was great, so happy to contribute.
Thank you, Greg. Greg, you've written several books for the Japanese market, but I want to focus our conversation on your Japan Sales Mastery book, which I believe was your first book. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. I really wish this book had been around when I started my career in sales here in Japan in 2005. It would have saved me a lot of trial and error trying to figure things out. In your book, you make it quite clear that in Japan, there's often no deal without long-term partner-level trust. Why is that? Why does relationships first approach matter so much here, maybe even more than in the Western markets?
Yeah, I think it all comes down to risk aversion on the part of buyers. We're rewarded in Western culture, business culture, for taking risks, for being innovative. We climb the ladder in our companies. We get bonuses. We get rewarded for taking those risks. In Japan, there's almost no upside for taking a risk as an employee in a company. So if you are going to have a new supplier come into your organization, it's a high risk from your viewpoint as an employee of the company. So you'd rather stick with people you already know, proven track record, reliability. A newcomer, inherently risky. So a few pennies less on the dollar is not going to sway someone to take that risk unless they feel that the relationship is going to be long-term and stable. So if we think, we'll just, discount our way into the market and we'll undercut the Japanese competitors or the other competitors, may find that that's very, very difficult to do. It won't work necessarily. We have to start building that trust from the very, very beginning.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And you talk about this concept of kokoro-gamae, right, which is translated into true intention. That's kind of the starting point you mentioned. How does a salesperson, show that they genuinely have it for the Japanese buyers, and how does that help to shape those first few interactions, right? Because it's the first time you're getting to know somebody. It's kind of, it can look like fake or false, or you're trying too hard. How can you genuinely bring that out?
Yeah, the idea of kokoro-gamae or true intention is, what is the starting point in your heart about client service? Are you honestly really thinking about, in the client's success lies my success, which is a very common idea in the West, but not often applied. Unfortunately, it's more rhetorical than reality. But in the Japan case, it better be a reality. And the other side of the table, when you're sitting across in negotiations or you're introducing your product or services, they have to feel that you really honestly are there to help them and that you're putting their interest first. And so this is where, when you first begin introducing what you can do, you're talking about the upside for them. And the sense is that, this person is genuinely here to help us succeed, because all the Japanese companies you're dealing with have ferocious local competitors. And if they can get steal a march on their competitors, they're very happy to do that. You might be the means of providing that, and therefore they may look at it, but they've got to feel that the intention is to help them succeed. And also, in terms of when you do strike a deal, and being flexible about the terms of the deal after the deal started, because things change in business. We tend to be very contract-oriented. Japanese not so contract-oriented. Situation changes, our relationship or our arrangement has to change. Not so many Western companies are so flexible.
Yeah, and I think, you got to have this kind of long-term view, right? Long-term view of what does this relationship look like, rather than, I think in sales, you're often chasing that next contract, right? We're looking at the close, like you start the process. When's the end coming? Where's the close? Where's that ka-ching, right? Before you go on to the next deal. So that's very true. I think kind of looking at it from a long-term relationship perspective. And for that, there's this concept of Nemawashi in Japan, right? Like laying the groundwork, working behind the scenes, building that long-term kind of trust. Can you walk us through a real example of, how you use Nemawashi to make a deal happen? Who did you talk to? When? How did you have to adjust your pitch along the way? Any stories you can share?
Well, generally speaking, I would say every Japanese deal is based around Nemawashi. And when we talk about groundwork, Nemawashi groundwork, what we're talking about is, inside the buying company, there are many people who can say no. And those people have to be dealt with. Now, we probably won't meet them. We will have the initial contact, the person we've met, could be a line manager, could be procurement department. In our case, as a training company, it's going to be the probably L&D or HR people. But there are going to be other division heads, other key components in the company who will be impacted by a decision to start buying from us as the new supplier, and they have to be dealt with. But we don't get to meet them, so we have very little opportunity to impact those people. However, our champion, the person we're interacting with directly, they have got that connection. They have got the ability to go behind the scenes and start to work that group inside and start to deal with their issues. Now, we have to provide the means for them to solve the issues for that group. And that's something where we contribute to the Nemawashi, but we can't lead it because we just don't get to meet those people. So Nemawashi is there for every deal, but our visibility of it is very opaque. But through our champion, we can influence. And that's something, every deal in Japan, I think, is like that.
Yeah, and I think, with that, working with your champion, sometimes your champion does start to slowly introduce you to other kind of key stakeholders that they want you to interact with and build that relationship with, right? So that often can help to facilitate, the overall deal-making process. But I think what they're trying to achieve is to remove those obstacles, right, from those persons. Because what I found in my interactions is if my champion isn't able to convince internally, then they bring other parties that they want me to be the convincer, to convince them on their behalf. And often this is done in more social settings, right, rather than in a traditional office setting over a meeting. It could be over a lunch or, or coffee or tea or something, it could often be you're sitting in the room and there are like 10 people across the table from you, and you think, who are these 10 people, right? But those 10 people are representing interest groups inside the company, often vested interest groups have already liked the existing arrangement. But there's your opportunity to appeal to them directly, which is a good thing. So you see a lot of people in the room, that's positive. So, if you have 10 people in the room and they're willing to spend that time to interact with you, that shows intent, right? So you should capitalize that intent and try to have a really engaging conversation with every, participant in the room, I would say. In the West, often big polished presentations, you can go in, sway the decision makers and win the room, right? If you have a room of 10, Western counterparts and you have a nice big polished presentation and you get up and you show it off, you can win. But in Japan, we know printed materials, dense brochures, detailed information tend to carry more weight. What does that mean for sales teams in Japan? Like how should we prepare? How do they need to rethink their materials, rethink their meeting style to build trust? Now, often we think, I come in, I meet the president, I convince the president it's going to be a deal. But the president or even a senior person, they will push that down to a person low on the totem pole to do the due diligence. And that person is tasked with finding out every possible thing that could go wrong and to eliminate those possibilities before we move forward. So they want as much detail as possible. So where we might be a little bit high level in the West, they are very detail oriented. So it may be that your materials by default are not so detailed, but you need to give them that degree of detail so that they can feel, okay, we understand exactly where the problems are possibly here or the dangers might be here, how we can overcome those or how these are not going to be a problem. So I would say the Japanese have a voracious appetite for detail. So you have to come, if your presentation materials are not so detailed, then you have to bring other detailed materials as a supplement and as addition, an addendum to give them that confidence that this is a good decision. So that is a big difference. They need that level of detail. Where in the West, maybe we don't need that level of detail. Yeah, and I find also, after the meetings, quite often there's the request for more information. The quicker you follow up, even if you don't have the information ready to send, if you give them a timeline and say, thank you for your meeting, you will get this material by the end of the week or next week on Monday, whenever that is, and keep that promise, that really helps to further build the relationships with, other stakeholders in the buying process, right? And in B2B, B2B selling, B2B buying is never simple, right? In Japan, like you mentioned, there are several stakeholders, decision makers, making is even more layered, very indirect, very consensus driven. How can foreign businesses figure out who the real influencers are beyond the obvious decision makers, like you pointed out, right? And how can you build those relationships with that wider network? Any tips on how to do that? Well, as I said, there is someone designated inside the company to do the due diligence, and then you have your champion. So generally speaking, we just don't get that degree of access to those people who are inside the organization from other divisions, which could be affected quite closely or even not so closely, but still have a voice, have a say, can say no, and then have to be persuaded. Yeah. So
our ability to meet them is pretty limited. So, it's hard to have that influence. But if, as you say, if your champion or the person who's doing the due diligence can get you in front of those people to answer their questions directly, that's a positive. But generally speaking, they are not looking for that either, because those people are busy. They expect the person doing the due diligence to sort it all out, get all the details, put a report together, push it up the line for each division head to then approve. Then it goes to the C-suite, who then approve it. So, yeah, the chances of meeting people from other divisions inside the organization, very, very remote chance. I think about all the deals I've done here. I generally don't get to meet those people, but the deal gets done, and it gets done mysteriously in a way, because I can't see those people. I can't see what they're saying, what they're doing, but I'm hearing their voice through my champion or through the person doing the due diligence. And as you say, speedy replies, accurate replies, understanding what they want, being cooperative. Those are things that they judge. Okay, this person looks like someone we can work with. I would get a request in Japan for information in the morning, and they're ringing me in the afternoon. Where's the answer? Now, a couple of days in the West to get back to somebody, no, that's not going to work in Japan. You better be on the ball here and be quick.
That's true, yes. And I've also experienced where, they would send an email and call to check if you received the email. And then that basically says, like, when are you going to respond to my email? Not did you receive the email, right? It's kind of an indirect way of saying, look, and because your champion's working on your behalf and they need to save face internally, right? That you are the right person that they're engaging with. So they would often call to say, did you get my email? And, then you got to have the conversation about, yes, we've got it. We're working on it. You can receive it by the end of the day or tomorrow morning. So then they can take it back internally and build that consensus internally as well. Yeah. So that's how you typically got to keep things moving along in Japan. But again, because consensus matters, sales cycles are longer, much longer than the West. In the West, if you think it's 6 months, 12 months in a big B2B scenario, it's probably double, twice, or more than that, right, in Japan. But how do you keep things moving along without coming across as too pushy or aggressive? Because you're asking for that answer, like, did you make a decision? Did you make a decision? And any tips for staying present, relevant over long decision cycles? Or simply not giving up, because you can tend to be like, okay, they're not interested. I've spent all this time and effort on it, and the deal's dead.
Well, often the deal can be dead because the internal consensus is too disruptive to our existing relationships, or we don't see the value from your offer, and therefore we're not going to proceed, and it sort of fades out. But often, though, it just does take a long time to work its way through the system. So you have to be more patient and just, have a regular cadence of just getting back, and always less pushy than in the West, but just asking, so how are we going? Anything more I can give you in terms of information? That's enough. You don't have to be driving, pushing people to come to a decision. Hey, listen, it's been 2 months now. What's going on over there? That type of behavior is not going to help you. Better to be indirect, be patient, just keep touching base. And it just may take a long time to work its way through the system, because the people on the other side of the desk there, the people you don't meet, they're busy. They're busy people. Your priority is not their priority. And it may take time for your champion or the person doing the due diligence to push it up the priority list to get them to actually even look at it. See, if you're aware of that, then it just takes longer. And I think this is the difference. You also say in Japan, getting the decision is slower, but the execution, once the decision is taken, is much faster. So you have to ask yourself, on balance, which is better? A quick decision and then very slow execution, or a slow decision and very fast execution? Probably time-wise, it probably doesn't make that much difference in the long run. But our fast reaction, quick turnaround Western mind really is pained by this slow Japanese, responses. So we have to be a bit more patient, I think.
I agree. And I think also, now that you mentioned that, I'm just reflecting on situations where we've been, speaking with Japanese counterparts on, when they ask for a lot more information, they're actually helping you prepare for the execution phase. So much so when you come to the deal's done, you look back and say, wow, we've got everything prepared, because they helped you prepare. They ask you for that detailed schedule. That is actually a good sign that they're getting closer to a deal. And they're indirectly, I feel, helping you prepare. So when, like you said, when they say, let's go, it's showtime. And you find that your team are all aligned, and the deals happens and things move quickly. That's actually a good point that you highlight there. You also talk in the book about overcoming Japanese buyers' hesitation, fear, and doubt. What are the common sources of those feelings, and how can a strong relationship prevent from killing or stalling a deal?
Well, again, I mentioned about risk aversion. And so you have to help your champion to conquer those fears inside the organization that a new entrant into the company, a new supplier into the company could be disruptive, or even worse, not fulfilling their requirements, not living up to what they said, not producing it on the date when it's due, or at the quality level, or at the pricing level that was agreed. So often they will not give you the full deal scope. They'll give you maybe a little test, some small segment of the supply might be agreed to test you out, to see what you're like, to see if you are reliable. And so often, demonstrations of capacity or trial orders are things that are low risk for the buyer, give you a chance to demonstrate your capacity. And so, I had a case where when I was working in Austrade, we had a deal to supply all of the steel towers for all of the phone networks here in Japan. And the company was going to come in here and really turn up the whole market. And they did very, very well. And great early start. But then some genius CFO probably said, okay, you know what? If we shift the production to Malaysia, to our factory there, we can make even more money. So let's do that. But then the product started to have problems, and things that were supposed to be working weren't working, and the quality went down, and therefore the whole deal in the end just got scuttled. And this is where if they'd stuck with their original high quality, secure supply, a reliable supply, they would have really revolutionized this market. In the end, they lost the market. And this is where they will judge you. They will judge you every step of the way. So you've got to be able to deliver. So I think, these things are obvious, but sometimes we make these economic decisions about, it's cheaper over here, but the quality is not there. You're going to pay a heavy price if you get that wrong.
Yeah, it just shows like there's no shortcuts, right? And especially once you've committed and once you've, promised a certain level of service or quality, you got to deliver that. And, like you said, the very first initial opportunity they give you because they want to test your ability to deliver, grab those opportunities with two hands and don't look at it and think, oh, wow, it's just a small deal. I will just pass it to our B team to handle. This is your opportunity to shine and outshine and actually show how you can, deliver extra value to the client. And very, very well said.
And it could take a year for the next order. Like they give you a small order in this financial year to test you, but you're not inside their system yet in terms of their budgeting, in terms of their planning. And so they'll be looking at the next financial year to place an order. You're thinking, a year? Most Western companies can't deal with a year. It's like, a year? Are you kidding? We need the deal now. And so they give up.
Yes.
But actually, this is the start. Yes, you do a small order this year, and next order will come. But the thing is, the year after that, and 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 the year after that. What's the lifetime value of the buyer here? And we forget that sometimes. And so if you get that small deal, it could grow into a lifetime relationship, which is exactly what you want.
Yeah, and I think like you pointed out, Japanese businesses are so well organized. It's about financial year planning, budget cycles. If they have a budget, they just stick to that budget. It's hard to get into expand the budget once they are mid-year. So you got to be patient and wait, understand when their budget cycles are. And typically it's April, we know, when the financial year runs in Japan. So really understand that. I think that gives you a chance, with your champion, understanding what's their buying cycles like, what are their budget cycles like, and preparing for the long-term deal while embracing every short-term immediate opportunities you get. Have you seen personal introductions or referrals happen in Japan? What any tips on how to use a referral, ask for a referral? It's really difficult to get referrals in Japan, right? So would you recommend it? Would you recommend asking clients for personal introductions or referrals?
Yeah, testimonials here are tough. Referrals here are tough. Like I've had Japanese companies tell me, when you ask for some sort of endorsement, for your company, they say, no, we can't do that because the other suppliers would be upset. And you're thinking, what do I care about the other suppliers? But they care about the other suppliers too, and they won't give you a testimonial. It's extremely hard to get that. It tends to be companies who are owned by the person you're dealing with who don't have to answer to anybody else who will do it. But in big companies, very hard to do that. Referrals too, because they don't want to take responsibility or accountability for introducing you to somebody else in case something goes wrong and then the blowback comes to them. So they prefer not to do it. It's very, very hard. If you've had a long-term relationship and things have been going very, very well over a long time and they feel that you're very, very reliable and therefore the chance of blowback or some negative feedback from the person they're referring to is not there, then they may do it, but it's difficult. It's very, very difficult. So I think where we tend to be more open to that type of thing, Japan not so much for different reasons. But again, they don't want to take the risk. Why should they take the risk of referring you to someone and it goes bad? Either you don't like them or they don't like you, and then, no one's happy. And they thought, well, hang on a minute, I'm getting pressure here for no good reason. I'd rather not have it. So this is where it is different. It is different. But I think your best referral is the fact that you've been serving that client for a number of years. And you can refer that, say, hey, listen, we've been supplying XYZ company now for 2 years or 5 years or 10 years or something. And another company, they look at that because in Japan, people generally speaking don't want to be the pathfinder. They don't want the arrows in the chest going forward, right? They want somebody else to get the arrows in the chest and they'll come afterwards after it's been proven and safe and everything's reliable, and then they'll step in and try something. So if they see another company has done it, I think, oh, well, okay, that company's very credible. And if they think this company's credible, then maybe they are credible and we'll give it a try. That's the best referral through your ability to build those long-term relationships. But when you enter, that's 3, 4, 5 years in the future. But there will be a 5 years in the future. There will be a 10 years in the future. So you've got to start somewhere and then build that reliability, and you'll harvest that later.
That's right. Yes. So building those logos, building those, case studies from that you can share, right, without expecting something in writing from your customer,
Winning. Well, you may not to be able to mention the testimonial publicly on your website or in your materials, but when you're talking to another buyer, you can reference, hey, listen, we work with such a company, and we've been doing that now for 10 years or 5 years or whatever. And they take comfort in that. Think, oh, well, they're a very good company. And they have done their due diligence. This is a serious company. They've done their due diligence and they've kept going with you. So, okay, maybe you can pass muster with us too.
Yeah, so it's kind of, they kind of vouch for you indirectly, right? Just to show that you've got that relationship with X number of years, that in itself is a testament to your ability to service like-minded businesses, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So winning the first deal is always a great feeling of accomplishment. You've done it. Yay. New client. We got the business with them. But you talked about this a little bit, but, I want to dig a little bit more deeper. Keeping the relationship, building loyalty, gaining repeat business, that is the real win, right? So what should foreign companies be doing after the first sale is done to keep that trust strong over the years to come and kind of build into it? What have you seen, with the businesses that you've represented and or clients that you've represented here?
I think the salesperson is very key. If you have a farmer looking after this client, they will take care of the follow-up beautifully. They are very invested in the client. They're very caring about the client. They're very careful about the client's interests, and they will make sure everything works. If anything goes wrong, they will fix it immediately and make sure the client's happy. Hunters, not so much. The thrill of the chase, landing the deal, yeehaw, on to the next one. That's the danger. So if you've got hunters, you better have a backup team of support to keep that relationship going. Because for the hunter, that's boring. Paperwork, detail, the minutiae. No, thank you. I want the next thrill of the hunt. So they will land the deal, but they're not great in farming the deal necessarily. I mean, some are, but generally speaking, it goes against the grain for them. So deal is landed. If the hunter is there, that, have a support team to take it over from them to then drive it forward. And I'm a hunter, so from personal experience, I know I have created problems unnecessarily because I'm a hunter and I'm on to the next deal, and I haven't been observant enough or careful enough about the ongoing deal, and that's caused a problem. And then you think, I created that problem from no particular necessity. Bad boy, don't do that again, But I do it because that's the mentality of the hunter. So you've got to have backup teams, I think. If you've got the combination of farmers doing it initially, or you hand it off to a farmer, great, then I think you'll be okay. But if you just leave it in the hands of the hunters, and I'm guilty, you can create your own unnecessary problems.
No, yeah, that's fair. So well said. From your experience, what are some of the common mistakes you see foreign companies, making when it comes to relationships, and how can a relationship first kind of mindset help them to avoid those, common mistakes? Yeah,
probably not communicating enough with the Japanese buyer, and this goes from the very start. As you said before, you just can't have long periods of silence. Now, they may be silent in the sense of they're digesting the idea internally, but you need to be just touching base, keep in touch. And even when the deal's landed, there might be seasonality to it, or it might be their financial year, or there may be a gap, just to keep in touch. Hey, hope everything's going okay. I'm looking forward to our next financial year. We can move up or whatever it is. Just to be overly communicative, I would say. We are, I think it's an irony, we're very zen in the West about communication. Less is more. The Japanese are more Baroque, lots of gold leaf, lots of activity, lots of contact. They prefer that. They like information and keep sending them information, keep in touch. I think that's very good. And also be patient. Things can take time here at the initial stage, but they can go very fast and very smoothly in the later stages. And if your goal is not a sale, and I always stress this, none of us here, I think, who are in business, are after a sale. Every one of us is after a reorder. And the kokoro-gamae, the true intention in your mind and your heart about what you're looking for in a sale and what you're looking for in a reorder are completely separate universes. And I think this is where, if we get the right mental framework, then we will really eliminate a lot of those problems, and just the way we approach the client, thinking reorder rather than a transaction or a once and done sale. Now, there will be transactional business, but generally speaking, that's not so intriguing to Japanese companies unless they're traders. So for most companies, they're looking for a long-term relationship.
Yeah. In Japan, you often don't get a no, you get a maybe. Kentoshimasu, right? Think about it. That kind of alludes to a no. What's been your experience with that, and how do you overcome that kentoshimasu? Are they genuinely thinking about it, or is that a flat out no, and then you need to kind of look at how can I rebuild this relationship or this order or whatever that is?
Yeah, mai muki ni kento itashimasu is a phrase about, in a very positive way, we're going to look at this, is a danger signal, isn't it? And it says, well, we're not really sure. But that, not every sale is going to be a sale. Not every meeting is going to be a sale. And maybe, you've not overcome their hesitation and doubt with enough information or guarantees or some, test phase or something. So I would always go for some initial test, some small order, just something to give them something to get their hands around that they can test you out and see how you perform, to give them more comfort, rather than just some theoretical abstract idea about, well, they may be a supplier who can do what they say they can do, but who knows? So I would be more inclined to do something practical. And also just to understand too that things change in business. Now, if you get sort of, mai muki ni kento tashimasu, sort of, we're going to look at this in a positive fashion, and you think, oh, that's a dead duck. I calendarize this as a 9-month later follow-up, because if I follow up in 3 months, there's probably not enough changed in their company or business to warrant them to have a second look at it. 6 months is the same problem. 12 months, you follow up and you find out your competitor's gotten in there and they have got the deal now because you were just missed out on the timing. So I think 9 months is enough time for business to change, but not being too short or too long. And I calendarize it. Okay, contact Robert in 9 months' time to see how they're going and just keep doing that. And, it may go nowhere, or they might go, oh, great. Yeah, hey, that's right. Let's talk again, because their situation can change, and there can be any number of factors going on in their company, in the industry, in the market, globally, regulations that can impact their world that you will never know about on the outside. So I would say never give up, but calendarize it. And I say 9 months is not perfect, but it's around about the right cadence, I think.
Yeah, I think that also gives you a good time to stay in touch with what's happening in their business. Put that, news alert or whatever, so that you're keeping in touch with what's happening in their business. If there are any major changes that you can see and you can spot some opportunity, then maybe you can bring that and say, hey, in the last 9 months, I've noticed that this, and this has happened in your business. Congratulations, you won this great deal. They feel that, oh, okay, wow, you've actually been following us and keeping up to date on what we've been doing as a business. And that really adds more credibility and value, I would say. And, talking about change, right? And, generally in Japan, people are hired as generalists, and every April there comes this change where, you have new people taking over. And the clients that we've got long relationships with, typically they would say, okay, I'm going to be changing departments. Let me connect you with who's going to be my successor. And you have that opportunity to have that interaction. That's great. That means you've got a solid relationship, that they care about who they're handing you over to. But quite often that does not happen. How do you prepare for that when okay, April's coming, probably the person that's been your champion for the last 9 months or a year now is probably going to move, and they haven't volunteered that information to you? How do you, try to work around finding out, is there going to be change, and how can you continue the relationship?
Yeah, I think if the relationship's a good one, they'll let you know and they will introduce you. If you haven't done enough to nurture the relationship, maybe they don't. So it really comes back to you. Are you nurturing the relationship to keep that in touch? But also, as I say, calendarizing, okay, movement is April. So a few months before that, are you staying in the same position? Are you likely to be moved? If you are going to be moved, could you introduce me to your successor, please? Should ask.
All right, let's wrap up, Greg, with a quick round of short, sharp answers to questions. What's your one local insight about Japan that's completely changed how you do business here?
Yeah, when I first came here in 1992 to live here and work and sell here, I brought my consultative sales techniques from Australia, tried to apply it to the Japanese buyers, and got zero progress, got nowhere. I couldn't understand it because, this works so well in Australia. And then I'm a slow learner, by the way. It took a while to filter down to my brain that I haven't built a relationship yet. I haven't done enough work on the rapport building. I'm coming in with the offer. They are not looking at the offer. They're looking at me. Can we trust this guy before we do anything? And I hadn't appreciated that. So that was a big turning point that I realized I have to hasten slowly, work on the relationship, build a rapport, build a trust, and then I can start applying consultative sales techniques around trying to understand the client. But I didn't appreciate that at the beginning. So that insight was a big insight for me. And the second big insight was that Japan and the buyer is not king, the buyer is God. And salespeople can't ask questions of God so easily unless you set it up. And so asking permission to ask questions of the buyer is a critical step. If you don't do that, you get very hard to get the answers you want. Once you get their permission to ask questions, then they're prepared to, as they say, open up the kimono and show you maybe the inner workings of the company, some of the issues they've got, some of the problems they've got, which no one else outside gets to see. To trust you with that knowledge takes steps before that. But once you get that, then permission to ask questions, you can explore the inner workings of where their problems are, and hopefully you're the solution to fix those problems. So I think those were two insights that really made a big difference for me.
Yeah, that's a really good insight. I think often as salespeople, we forget that we have the ability to ask for permission, right? So we should use that more often. Is there a book or a podcast or a resource that's helped you shape how you sell here in Japan?
Well, this sounds a bit self-serving, but I'm going to say Japan Sales Mastery, writing that book, really helped me a lot. And the reason I wrote the book was because the previous book on how to sell in Japan was published in 1988 by Robert March, also an Australian, called The Japanese Negotiator. And because Japan sort of went off the boil with China becoming so important, no one was writing about Japan. And that's when I decided, well, I'll write the book on selling in Japan that hasn't been published for 30 years. But the writing of the book helped me a lot to clarify for myself things that are important, to explore in more depth the things that I vaguely felt but didn't really articulate well enough, perhaps. It clarified a lot of things for me, actually, just in the process, the intellectual rigor of having to write that book. So that helped me a lot, actually. And it's also, I mean, as a training company, we're not a publisher trying to sell books. We're trying to sell training. So the book has been able to give a lot of credibility to our knowledge of what we're doing. And we use it as a textbook. We have a Japanese version, Zaegyo, and then the English book, Japan Sales Mastery. So we use it as a textbook in our training as well, because it covers everything you need to know. So I think that's been a very defining thing for me.
Yeah, I totally agree. And, like I said, when I started in sales, there wasn't any book like this, like up-to-date book. And so your book really helped me, when it came out. And, for those who want to dive deeper into, sales in Japan, please do check out Japan Sales Mastery. We'll put the link in the show notes. Greg, thank you so much for sharing your insights, experiences, and stories with us today. I think our listeners will walk away not just with ideas, but a whole new mindset about what it takes to win in Japan. Thank you very much for listening. Yeah.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to talk.
Thank you very much for listening or watching Asia AIM podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please do subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And I'd also love to get your review. Reviews make a huge difference in how other people discover the show. So thanks again, and we'll be back soon with more conversations on how to win in Asia's dynamic markets.
Thanks for tuning in to the Asia AIM podcast. If today's conversation sparked new ideas or insight, be sure to subscribe, rate, and share the show. For more resources, tips on doing business in Asia, or to book a meeting with our team, visit asiaimpodcast.com. Stay curious, stay connected, and we'll see you in the next episode of Asia AIM.